She checked her phone one last time, smiled at the message on her screen, then told her friend, "He seems really sweet." That was the last message Katie Locke ever sent. She was 23 years old, a teacher, someone her students looked up to, someone her parents described as having not a bad bone in her body. She wasn't careless. She wasn't reckless. She did what millions of people do every single day. She went on a date with someone she met online, and she never came home. Today we're covering the case of Katie Locke, a case about more than just one man's cruelty, a case about lies, missed warnings, and a system that failed her. Not once, but multiple times. Stay with me, because the most disturbing part of this story, it's not what he did. It's what people already knew about him and said nothing. Before we get into what happened, you need to know who Katie was, because true crime is too often about the killer and not enough about the person whose life was taken. Katie Louisa Locke was 23 years old and lived in Buckhurst Hill, Essex, a quiet, leafy suburb on the edge of London. She had studied at the University of Southampton, graduated, and was already living her dream. She was a history and politics teacher at Cardinal Pole School in Hackney, East London. Think about that for a second. 23 years old, your first real job, your first classroom, your first group of students counting on you. That was Katie's life in December 2015. Her father, Bill Locke, told an inquest years later that his daughter lived life to the full, that she was a generous person who cared for others and prioritized them. Friends and family described her as vibrant, warm, and hardworking. She wasn't just surviving her early 20s, she was thriving. But like most 23-year-olds in 2015, she was also navigating the world of online dating. Apps like Tinder and Plenty of Fish had completely changed how young people met. Millions were using them. It felt normal. It was normal. So when Katie created a profile on Plenty of Fish in December 2015, she wasn't doing anything unusual. She was just looking for connection. And that's when Carl Langdell found her. Who was Carl Langdell? On the surface, charming, successful, educated. But what was hidden underneath would shock even the detectives on this case. We'll get to that. But first, let's talk about how the date actually began. It started the way a lot of dates start. A match, a few messages, some back and forth. Does he seem normal? Does he seem safe? Carl Langdell's profile said he was a lawyer, that he owned his own law firm. He seemed educated, articulate, successful. Katie had no reason to doubt any of it. They messaged for about 2 weeks before agreeing to meet. December 23, 2015. Just 2 days before Christmas. They met in Shoreditch, East London, a buzzing, artsy area full of bars and restaurants. The kind of place young Londoners go on dates all the time. The evening went well. At some point that night, Katie texted a friend. She said the date was going well. She was happy. She felt comfortable. As the night went on, they decided to take it further. They got in a taxi together and headed north, out of London into Hertfordshire. Their destination, Theobalds Park Hotel in Waltham Cross, a large historic country house hotel set in quiet parkland, the kind of place that feels private and far removed from the bustle of the city. They checked in during the early hours of December 24th, Christmas Eve. No one outside those walls knew exactly what passed between them that night. But we know how the morning ended. Katie Locke never left that hotel alive. Here's what makes this case truly chilling. And I promise you, we are only just getting started. Because when police began investigating, they didn't just find a killer. They found a paper trail of warnings that went back years. Evidence that what happened to Katie should never have been allowed to happen at all. Let me tell you how Christmas morning unfolded. Langdell had asked hotel staff for a late checkout. He'd placed a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door. To anyone who saw him, he appeared calm, composed. He checked out and left. But before he left, he did 3 things. He strangled Katie Locke to death in their hotel room. He committed a deeply disturbing act of sexual violence against her body. And then he wrapped her in bedding, used a hotel laundry trolley, and moved her outside. He left her hidden in bushes, around 10 yards from a dumpster, on the grounds of the hotel. And then he left. Katie's body was hidden in the undergrowth. It was Christmas Eve, and her family were at home, waiting for her to walk through the door. When Katie didn't come home, her family didn't immediately panic. Maybe she'd stayed over. Maybe her phone had died. But hours passed. No call, no text, nothing. Her father reported her missing. And then, her friends did something that would prove absolutely crucial. They started searching online. They had details from Katie's messages. They knew the name he'd given. They knew where she said she was going. Working quickly, her family and friends pieced together Langdell's real identity from his social media and dating profiles. They contacted him directly. He told them, "Katie got in a taxi. I don't know where she went." A lie. A calm, calculated lie. But even as he was lying to her family, something else was happening. Langdell called his mother, and what he told her stopped her cold. He told her he had killed a girl. He called himself a monster. His mother, in shock, reached out to Katie's father and passed the information to police. Police traced Langdell, and when they found him, he told them where Katie's body was. Officers went to the hotel grounds, and they found her, wrapped in bedding, hidden in the bushes. It was Christmas Day. Think about Katie's parents. Christmas morning, the presents under the tree, the family traditions, and getting a phone call that their daughter, their vibrant, generous, beautiful daughter, was gone. Carl Langdell was arrested and charged with murder that same day. And when police began digging into his background, what they found was absolutely staggering, because this man should never have been free to meet Katie in the first place. Stay with me, because this is the part of the story that almost nobody talks about. Remember how his dating profile described him as a lawyer? As a successful professional? Here is the truth. Carl Langdell had never owned a law firm. For 2 years before the murder, he had been in and out of psychiatric hospitals. He had been diagnosed with emotionally unstable personality disorder, with narcissistic and antisocial traits, what professionals privately assessed psychopathic tendencies. He had been sectioned under the Mental Health Act. He was known to multiple NHS trusts, multiple police forces, and the National Probation Service. And it gets worse. Langdell had told a community psychiatric nurse, a mental health professional, about his fantasies. He described wanting to cut a woman's throat, to see her naked, to have sex with her after she was dead. This was documented, written down, recorded. And yet, the professionals who heard it did not escalate it into any coordinated protection plan for women in the community. His history of violence wasn't just fantasy either. In 2009, he was cautioned for assaulting a girlfriend. In 2014, he assaulted his own brother. And just 3 weeks before he murdered Katie Locke. 3 weeks. He was in court for threatening to kill 2 people, a woman close to his girlfriend and a mental health professional. He received a 9-month suspended sentence. Not prison, a suspended sentence. He walked out of that courtroom free. And what did he do with that freedom? He went home, opened a dating app, and started talking to Katie. At the time of the murder, police and investigators later discovered he was simultaneously messaging up to 20 different women across multiple dating sites. 20 women. He had even used the same hotel, Theobalds Park, for an overnight stay with a different woman before he ever met Katie. This wasn't a sudden act. It wasn't a moment of madness. This was a predator operating in plain sight. And here's the question that haunted this case for years afterwards. Could the system have stopped him? When the inquest finally examined that question in 2021, the answer was devastating. But before we get there, let's talk about the trial and the words a judge said to Carl Langdell that are almost impossible to forget. Carl Langdell was charged with the murder of Katie Locke. In March 2016, he appeared at St. Albans Crown Court, and he pleaded guilty. No trial, no drawn-out legal battle, just a guilty plea. In June 2016, Judge Andrew Bright QC handed down his sentence. The judge looked at Langdell and said, "I am firmly of the view that you pose a very great danger to women and young girls with whom you come into contact in the future. And I note that you have described yourself to others as a monster and a psychopath because of what you did to Katie Locke." He told him the sexual assault on Katie's body increased the depravity of the murder. And then the judge added, "Once you have served the minimum term I have set, it will be for others to decide when, if ever, it will be safe for you to be released." The sentence, life imprisonment, with a minimum of 26 years. Meanwhile, prosecutor Ann Evans spoke words that should stay with all of us. She said, "The tragedy of this case is that Katie Locke, like thousands of other young people having agreed to a date with Karl Langdell, accepted what he told her about himself. She didn't do anything wrong. She trusted someone who told her he was safe. And the tragedy is, she had no way of knowing the truth. Her family told the court that losing Katie had left them, in the words reported at the time, feeling as though their future had been taken from them, that she didn't have a bad bone in her body, and that she worked hard and loved her job as a teacher. But the story doesn't end with a life sentence. Because 5 years after Katie's murder, the truth about what could have been prevented finally came out in a courtroom, and the findings were damning. In 2021, after years of campaigning by Katie's family, a full inquest was held to examine one painful question. Could this have been prevented? HM Assistant Coroner Allison McCormick presided over the inquest, which heard from police, probation officers, and mental health professionals who had all been involved with Langdell in the years before the murder. What the inquest revealed was not just one failure. It was failure after failure, layer upon layer of missed opportunities. The coroner found a number of lost opportunities for sharing information between the public bodies regarding the murderer. She described very little information sharing and no joined-up thinking or management of Langdell in the community. Probation services admitted they had never considered applying for a sexual harm prevention order, a legal tool that could have restricted Langdell's access to women online. Concerns that mental health staff had raised internally about Langdell being a risk to female staff. Those concerns were never translated into warnings that could protect women outside the system. In other words, people knew he was dangerous. People knew about his violent fantasies. People knew about his history of attacking women. And none of them, not one agency, connected the dots in a way that might have kept women like Katie safe. A prevention of future deaths report was issued by the coroner, a formal legal document sent to police, probation, and mental health services, telling them to change their practices before someone else dies. That document now sits in court records, a permanent reminder of what was lost. And here's one final detail in this case, something that nobody predicted when that life sentence was handed down in 2016. Karl Langdell never served those 26 years. On the 11th of February 2021, just months before the inquest into Katie's death concluded, Karl Langdell was found in his locked single cell at HMP Wakefield, a maximum security prison. He had a severe wound to his neck. Despite emergency treatment, he went into cardiac arrest. He was declared dead at 1:47 a.m. He was 31 years old. The investigation into his death concluded it was a suicide. For Katie's family, this news must have been complicated. The man who killed their daughter would never spend 26 years in prison. The sentence the judge had handed down, the justice the system had promised. It played out in a way no one expected. What doesn't change is this. Katie Locke was 23 years old. She was a teacher. She was someone's daughter, someone's friend, someone who, in the words of her own father, cared for others and prioritized them. She went on a date, something millions of us do without a second thought, and she deserved to come home. So what do we take from this case? Not fear, not the idea that dating is dangerous or that strangers are all threats, but this. The systems we trust to keep us safe. Police, mental health services, probation. They don't always talk to each other. They don't always act in time. and real people pay the price for those gaps. Katie's family didn't just grieve. They fought for years to get answers, to force an inquest, to make officials explain what went wrong. Because of them, those failures are now officially on record. Because of them, recommendations exist that might, just might, stop someone else from going through what they did. If this story affected you, that's a natural response. It's supposed to. Katie was real. Her family's grief is real. And the best way you can honor her story is to share it with people who should know it. If you watch this far, you're exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. Hit subscribe, because every week we cover cases like this. Real stories, real people, told with the respect they deserve. And leave a comment below. What shocked you most? Was it the fact that he was on a suspended sentence just weeks before the murder? Was it that he was messaging 20 other women at the same time? Or was it the system failures that came out in the inquest? Tell me below. I read every single one. Katie Locke, 23 years old, a teacher, remembered.